February, I went on my first backpacking trip, and I brought with me a kit of what I thought were the most essential supplies for making art while out in nature. But when I got there, I realized I totally brought the wrong stuff. So I want to teach you what I learned. I'm going to share what I learned from my last pack, how I apply that to new adventures, the ways that my friends inspired me, and the different things that I put in my new kit. And then I will give you some prompts for figuring out what to take with you when you're going out on art adventures. Let's get into it. I learned a big lesson from my supplies in regards to these little guys, my alcohol markers. These guys did not love the desert. Due to the fact that it was incredibly dry in Joshua Tree, I ended up accidentally ruining a couple. Truly tragic. I'll show you what they look like now. They're really streaky and definitely not that kind of juicy alcohol marker magic that they once were. This one still has its magic there. Plus, I realized after doing a little bit more travel that it was probably bad advice for me to tell you to bring these on a plane because you cannot fly with them. So these Ola markers are really great because they're lightweight and they have this little mechanism inside of them that allows them to twist together. So each of these weigh basically nothing, and then being able to twist them together allowed me to have 2 markers in the footprint of 1 marker. So, you know, if you're a backpacker, you know that weight is a huge thing. It's super important. And I loved how lightweight these were. When I was prepping to go on a trip to Costa Rica, I realized that I definitely couldn't bring these because the TSA considers them flammable. And I personally want every interaction that I have with the TSA to be as chill as possible. So if you're traveling by plane, these guys right here are a skip. Keep in mind though, for local travel, these are really, really amazing tools to have on hand. Their blendability is truly unparalleled, being able to layer directly on top. I really love using them in the landscape, so they are something that I'm going to bring with me, especially during the rainy winters here in California. I'll show you a little sketch. I fell in love with using these when I first got them in Japantown in San Francisco last year. So I really liked this one. And I was also pretty into how this one turned out of some plants that I observed. I also really liked to bring them with me when I was, say, sketching at a friend's studio. So I went and visited my friend Camille and I was sketching in her studio using these. And I think they were really great for being able to block out big sections of color, and especially when working from the figure, they're really awesome for blocking out that structure the same way that I would with paint. In my sketchbook, I ended up leaning pretty heavily on my Tombow brush pens. These things are really awesome. They're water-based, and they have this nice little brush tip that make them some stiff competition for alcohol markers, but they don't have the blendability of the alcohol markers. So, for example, I used them when I was in Costa Rica recently, and they just, when drawing from the landscape in person, they're not quite as good as my alcohol markers are, but doing more illustrative spreads, they are truly awesome to have on hand. These little markers led to the drawings of my gear that I turned into a zine, and I'm always going to keep at least 2 of these around as an essential part of my kit. Because my minimalist kit was inspired by the rose art set that I carried around as a kid, I originally packed some of these fancy adult crayons, and I want to share why I don't think I'm going to bring them again. I really love them in this case, and they have this nice little padding to keep them safe. However, with some of the colors I brought to Joshua Tree, I'll show you this here, I cracked them, which is so disappointing. These are expensive materials, and they're really, really nice to use because it's just pigment and wax. But I don't think that these are going to be a win for me to have with me in the future. The reason that I brought these is that colored pencils are truly awesome. I have this kind of wild roll of colored pencils that I use, and I pull some out and put them in different kits. Colored pencils are awesome, but the marks that I like to make with colored pencils have a tendency to aggravate the wrist injury I got from previously marathon drawing without breaks or stretching. So learn from me, and if you are drawing for a long period of time, make sure you take breaks and stretch. The way that I like to work with colored pencils is two ways. I've really liked using them as a monochrome tool for capturing the values in a drawing. And in my other sketchbook, I really loved using them directly on top of acrylic leftover paint. So like this one and this one is just colored pencil directly on top of that paint. But I'm pressing pretty hard with the colored pencils in order to get the look of these. So definitely not the most healthy thing for my wrist. I also found that on my Joshua Tree trip, I brought way too many of these colored pencils. I think I brought 10 or 11 of them, and now I'm having a lot more fun switching out the 2 or 3 that I have on hand to experiment with. Overall, this kit was an amazing test on how I could keep things lightweight and breezy, but it definitely needed to be refined. So my friend Erin came over for a drawing day and brought the tiniest kit of supplies. I found this to be a huge inspiration to pare down what I bring with me. Here's her kit: 2 Bic mechanical pencils, 2 Prismacolor pencils, a Muji 0.5 pen, a fun ballpoint pen, a Micron 2, a Pigmographic 1, 2 Faber-Castell brush pens, and an amazing Delete eraser. So inspired by Erin, I started asking myself, how can I bring less and get the same impact? How can a smaller set of supplies act like a useful constraint? So I grabbed my trusty JanSport burrito and I started to work on paring down the absolute essentials. I used to use this little guy as my brush roll. This is where I would keep between 15 and 20 watercolor brushes rolled in this. And it's nice because it would allow me to actually tuck them underneath this little flap and prevent them from getting damaged in travel. However, going out and painting made me realize I only really use about 5 brushes if I'm sketching, so there's no point in having more. Let's pack this thing up together with the things that I like to bring sketching with me now. I really love to eat this pouch. I really love this little pouch because 1, it reminds me to eat when I'm hungry. Too often when I'm super focused and making art, I totally forget about food. So because this looks like a yummy burrito, it reminds me, hey, it might be time for a snack. Other thing that I really love about this is that the combination of having these little elastic slots and the mesh pocket allows me to bring a really wide variety of supplies. And the first thing I want to talk about are pens. So my partner, myself, and Erin are all obsessed with these Muji 0.5 pens. If you've never tried them, I can't recommend them enough. They are the most wonderful thing to write with and a fun tool to have on hand for line work in my sketchbook. The ink flow from these and the tip design is incredible. So I always keep this Muji pen with me. And then next up, this Micron 0.5 has also become a new little friend. I used to really love the design and flow of the Lee pen, if you're familiar with this, but I decided to upgrade to something with a little bit more punch and pigment for writing. Since I work in watercolor, I always keep a 3H pencil with me. If you can tell, this one's very loved, but I really like these because the hardness of the pencil makes it so that there will be less of the graphite picked up by your brush when you're working with the watercolor. I also always keep a retractable X-Acto blade as a sharpener with me. I like that it retracts so I can stay safe. And inspired by Erin again, these are the 3 colored pencils that I keep on hand. The first is the Prismacolor Chartreuse. This one is for drawing warmly lit scenes. I keep a cloud blue for capturing the outlines of all the coastal hills, rocks, and fog here in the Bay Area. And I also have a Prussian green for drawing more generally in a single tone. Here are the swatches of all 3 of those, you can see. What's really nice is all of these supplies tuck into this first compartment here, so I'll take my colored pencils and I'll tuck them in like this, tuck them into bed with my 3H pencil, and then because I use these Muji and Micron pens quite a lot, I'll tuck those right on top. with that little bit on the handle resting on the elastic. All of these supplies are tucked in here with the exception of my X-Acto blade, and that I usually tuck into my mesh pocket with a folded piece of paper towel, an eraser, and my X-Acto blade and some type of ruler. Next up, brushes and my gouache set. I have another whole video about this particular gouache set, so I don't want to go too into it here. I'll make sure that I link it down in the description. I really like this case because it has a little silicone top that keeps the moisture out and keeps different colors from leaking into one another, which is really nice. As you can tell, it is extremely well loved. So I take this thing pretty much everywhere with me, and I've already had to refill some of these several times. Right now, I actually replaced my ruler with just having this little swatch on some cardstock. I want to show you, these are the colors that I use in my gouache set. I'll have the list down below in my description. I'm not sponsored by Blick. I don't work with them as an affiliate, but I get all of my paints from them. Really recommend the brand's Holbein, which is most of what I'm using here. Their artist squash is really great. And then Daniel Smith. I really like the fact that they make a buff titanium, and their Hansa Yellow Deep is super pigmented and impressive. So into the brushes in my gouache set. If you notice a pattern here, that is on purpose. I have been and always will be an angle shader ghoulie. I think that these are incredible. You get so many different marks from just one type of brush, whether you're using the tip or you're using the side, or you're kind of playing with bending the brush in different ways. So I have a 1/2 inch version of it from Princeton Select, a 3/8 inch Princeton Velvet Touch angular shader. I really like the feedback of the brush on this one. It's a little bit less soft than the Princeton Selects. A Princeton Select 1/4 inch. This is my favorite brush ever. If I only had to bring one brush, it would be this one. An 1/8 inch angle shader. This is what I use for tiny details and text. I always use that very edge tip for those tiny details. And then I recently picked up this Princeton Velvet Touch 6 Filbert on a sale on brushes at Blick, and I've been really into it. I think what's fun about this is that it's a great tool to have on hand for some variety in mark making and for making some straighter lines when painting architecture. So these guys, I just tuck right in here, and then I can scoot them up and have them covered by this flap, which is great. The last 2 compartments are my pens. So I really like to keep these Stabilo or Stabilo pens on me. These are a fine 0.4, and I use this really, really light blue for sketching when I don't have a pencil or especially a sharpened pencil or a sharpener like my X-Acto blade on me. So this is really great for sketching when you travel. And then I really like this one for making some marks directly on top of my Tombow brush pens. I can show you that in my sketchbook. And I drew the Smith Rock Misery Trail. I also used it to sketch behind these colored pencil drawings, and I used it on this drawing of the Steelhead Falls Canyon view. And with this one, this is that light blue that I mentioned. You can see how it's almost translucent. It's almost like kind of using a 3H pencil. So I really, really love this in lieu of having a pencil on me. So these guys I tuck in here, and they get to rest next to my N35 Tombow brush pen. I love this thing. This is how I write thicker text in my notebook. I absolutely am obsessed with the brush tips on these, and that's the kind of cool color, that cool gray. I also really like to keep the kind of sienna tones, so this kind of yellow ochre, it's 026, and the brown 969. I'll show you some no-tan studies I did with these Tombows. These really allow me to just think about form, shape, and light. I also used the Stabilo pens quite a bit when I was drawing on my plane ride home from Costa Rica. And so here's two drawings where I used it directly on top of the Tombow brush pens, and I think that it created a cool effect. If you are curious about seeing the whole sketchbook that I made when I was in Costa Rica, I started this actually on April 2nd, and it's almost halfway done. I'm going to be doing a full sketchbook tour of this guy here on the channel soon, so make sure you subscribe so you'll be the first to know when it's out. All right, a couple other things that I do is I take this little swatch kit and I tuck that right behind my Tombow, and then I can roll it up like a burrito. And then on the outside here, like right on the little JanSport logo, I take my binder clips and I just go clip, clip. So that way I have something to help hold my sketchbook open when I'm painting out in plein air. All right, so then this guy could be all I bring with me, just this and my sketchbook. This would be a perfect minimalist, throw these two things in my bag and go. But if I want to paint and I want to have more options available to me, I like to put this roll and these things, and as well as some other stuff, inside one of these little packing cubes from Baggu. These things are super durable, they keep my bag organized, and they are cute as all heck, so Baggu, please sponsor me. I have my tape in here. So what I do is I take my little burrito and I put that in here, and then I follow that up with my sketchbook. And then on top of that, I put my paint. And then I have one of two ways that I can go with bringing a cup. I don't use any pigments that are hazardous like cadmiums or lead, and I try to be conscientious of packing my water out. If weight is not an issue, I prefer to use a jam jar for my water because it's nice and sealed, and I can just tuck that in here. But if I want to be more lightweight, this is a really great option. This thing weighs like nothing. I can hold it up with like my pinky finger. I got this little Hahnemühle cup through Blick, and it has this little top that pops on top of it, and then it just pops open like that. It's really neat. But with this, you have to spill your water out somewhere. So if you are using any pigments like acrylic gouache or anything that could be harmful, keep an extra little water bottle on you for putting that extra water that you used into, or really try to pack it out. But if you're gonna pour that water out, bring a coffee filter with you, so that way any particulates like those plastics aren't going into the water table. All right, and then I'm gonna bring my tape because I can, it fits in here, and then I just zip that up. I realized there was one thing that I forgot to share with you, and that's how I mix my paint when I'm out in the landscape. So there's one of two ways. The first, one of these enamel butcher trays. I really like these because they're relatively lightweight, but they allow me to mix so many colors and rehydrate anything that I mixed previously. The other option that I really like to bring is just a tiny piece of toned palette paper. So I just take my piece of paper, I fold it up, and then I can either support it underneath some of my supplies or bring a clipboard and just clip it to the top, like so. I like to have this set packed in the little cube at the end of my day in my studio, so if the inspiration strikes me tomorrow to ride my bike somewhere and paint, I can do it. Or if my friends invite me to paint at the botanical garden, there's no prep or stress about what I need to bring with me. I have it all right here and I'm ready to roll. The last thing that you might want in your kit is a camping chair like this one, or a sitting pad like this one. I mentioned both of these in my fun PDF that I give away for free on my Substack. If you sign up for either the free or paid tier, you'll get access to this neat resource about how to see more creatively outside, so that way you can practice seeing, staying present, and testing out your kits in the landscape. Of course, there is a paid tier on my Substack, and I'd love to have you there. It's where I share monthly creative prompts and a little bit more private behind-the-scenes stuff in my studio. This month, I'm going to be focusing on how I support my self-care as a studio artist, because making time to exercise, meal prep, and maintain normal house chores has become increasingly difficult the more I put on my business and studio practice. Speaking of prompts, here are my free prompts for you to pare down and create your own art kit. First thing you want to do is try paring down your kit at home. Grab your first 3 brushes, pencils, or things that you used the last time that you made some art, and try making art for a week with just those supplies. In your notebook or sketchbook, take note of the things that you miss. Are there things that you wish you had? Could you swap those out next week? Are there fun limitations that are being created by having such a constrained palette? With this one, really take note of the supplies that you're longing for and why you are longing for them. Is there a particular technique that you feel like you can't achieve with them? Or is there something else that just excites you more and you want to have it with you? My second prompt for you is to take inventory while you work. So if you're getting out your art supplies and you start working, take note of them in a notebook or start a spreadsheet. Definitely something I would do, maybe a Notion database, and really write down and get clear on all of those different things that you're using. That way you can really figure out systematically what the things are that you're gravitating toward and what you're gonna miss when you're out in nature. All right, my next one is to test drive your kit. This is really going to help. So if you're planning on traveling soon, creating a kit and using that while you're traveling is a really, really great way to see if that kit is right for you or if you can make any changes. Another great one is to create a kit, test it out by throwing it in your backpack and taking it out to a local trailhead. 2 things that are going to happen there. 1, the weight of your kit will be put to the test as to whether or not you want to carry it with you on a regular basis. And 2, it'll really help you figure out if there's anything that you are missing before you go on a big trip or tour. So my 4th one is a little bit unconventional, and this is to make a paper list of your favorite supplies, put it in your pocket, and go out on a long walk. Long walks, bike rides, hikes, all of these types of outdoor activities can really function as awesome moving meditations for you to get really, really clear on what it is that you love. Are you gravitating towards a certain supply because of a class that you took recently that got you really excited about using that supply? Is it from something you learned when you were in school? Is it something that you picked up on a YouTube video? Is it something that you loved absolutely so much when you were a kid? That's me with crayons. So think about that and make sure that you're incorporating those things into whatever ends up being your particular kit. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found the tour of my new kit and the lessons that I learned, as well as the prompts, super helpful in helping your creative practice. If you want, feel free to comment down below if there was something in particular that helped you, if you have more questions. I am absolutely loving the community that I am building here with all of you on YouTube. So seriously, leave me a comment, connect with me on some of my other social media that's down in the description. And until next time, keep finding your own ways to stay creative and form your own sense of persistent bloom. See ya. God, why is it so hard to remember lines?